out of my life. I crossed the threshold of my home with relief. I'm finally safe. After the hell in which I had recently lived, for the first time I felt calm and free. I met Yura at a party with mutual friends. He was sweet, handsome, sociable. We started dating. 2 months later, the guy invited me to live with him. Our relationship was perfect. Literally 6 months later, we got married. My parents saw their son-in-law only once, at a wedding. It seems that Yura was jealous of me even with the lampposts. It was terrible. Until I married Yura, he seemed like the ideal man. He was so gentle and caring. I was touched by his care, and only then I realized that this was just a painful feeling of possessiveness. Soon after the marriage was registered, my beloved showed his real face. He kept throwing terrible scenes of jealousy at me. I couldn't even look at another man. I immediately received a slap in the face. Then my husband began to beat me regularly and often locked me out at home. For example, I couldn't even go to work, so it's not surprising that I didn't stay at any company for long. Having no money of my own, I was dependent on my husband, and he took mean advantage of it. However, the worst thing was that Yuri forbade me to go to my parents. She endured all this for a whole year because she loved him very much and wanted to prove her love. But the more tenderly she was with him, the more suspicions her beloved arose. "Are you tormented by remorse?" the husband asserted rather than asked. "And you want to assuage your feelings of guilt in front of me? Admit it. With whom did you cheat again?" He worked himself up and then let go of his hands. I didn't know what to do. I felt like a hunted animal. And this fear. It was never known what would become the next reason for beatings. Maybe on his part it was love, but it was somehow painful and dangerous. Finally, I realized that I could no longer live like this and ran away. One morning, as soon as Yura left for work, she took her passport and called a taxi, deciding to return to her parents. She left a letter on the table for her husband, in which she informed him that I was leaving him and filing for divorce. He called, but I didn't answer. It was scary. Although I was in no danger, Yura was far away, but still, I didn't want to talk to him, listen to his endless swearing and threats. "Get out of my life," I screamed. "Get lost in hell." That evening I was sitting with Kachuka, my closest school friend, in my old room in my parents' house, and it seemed to me that time had turned back. We always understood each other perfectly. They even came up with a fortune-telling game. Guess your fate using a tarot card. "Listen, let's check if we are as close as before," said Katya. "Sure, you guess first." She laid out the cards upside down. I glanced at them. At first I noticed the second one from the left in the top row, but then something made me think about the last one. Inverted death. Katya thought for a while, and then took that same card. Incredible. It still works. But you know, this time everything was not so simple. At first it seemed like it should be the second one from the left, but then I changed my mind, she explained. "It's your turn." I also opened the card she had hidden, but suddenly I became very anxious. The game started to make me feel strangely uneasy. Now it's me again. Kachuka squinted her eyes excitedly. I looked at the cards, which looked the same from above, and for a long time I could not decide. The gaze fell on the last one in the bottom row, on the right side. A friend picked it up, and we saw the upside-down death. I trembled with fear. "Don't be stupid," Katya laughed. "After all, this card in the tarot means something completely different." She did not have time to finish the sentence, because suddenly the lamp began to blink, and then the light went out, and some invisible force slammed the window shut with a crash. Katya went home, and I tried to calm down, went to bed, but only turned from side to side. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, the mobile phone rang. My mother-in-law's number came up. Probably Yura is trying to intimidate me, and she didn't answer. And a minute later I received an SMS. Yura died. Yesterday afternoon, he had an accident. I read with horror. He died exactly at the moment when I chose the inverted death card. Story 2. Morgue. Once I had to get a job as a night shift worker at one of the morgues. The work is not dusty. Within 3 days, the clientele is flexible, without any special complaints. At first, of course, it was scary and disgusting. Then nothing. I got used to it. One day I'll go on duty. By evening, Mitrich appeared. He worked at this morgue for probably 20 years. He comes and says, "Lock yourself in the duty room tonight and don't come out no matter what happens." It's a bad night today. The first night of the full moon. Anything can happen. At this point, naturally, I broke down. Whatever epithets I gave to Mitrich. It seemed to me that it was a shame that the poorly educated watchman intended to scare me. a person with a higher education. Mitrik listened silently and said, "As you know, I warned you." He turned around and walked away. By the end of the working day, I probably would not have remembered this incident. Only one detail alerted me. Mitrik was sober and spoke quite seriously. After work, the senior dissector stayed with me to talk about philosophical topics. We were sitting in the duty room, arguing. But this detail, Mitrik is sober and calm, does not give me peace. Late in the evening, my interlocutor left. I locked the door behind him and was left alone. I checked the refrigeration unit, looked to see if everything was in order in the autopsy rooms, turned off the lights and returned to my duty room. It's like this: an entrance door, next to a duty room and a long T-shaped corridor, at the end of which there are doors leading to the corpse storage facility, autopsy rooms and other rooms. Several lamps are lit in the corridor all night. The light in the duty room should also be on, but the guards always turn it off when they go to bed. The doors, except the exit door, are not closed anywhere. They are simply tightly closed. There was a latch on the door in the duty room, but the door was always left wide open. The same was true that night. The face is quiet, no wind, no noise from cars. There is a low moon in the sky. I read Grimmelshausen, but no, and I listened to the silence. At midnight I felt sleepy. I decided to lie down, and then I hear the door creaking in the corridor. Carefully, almost inaudibly, but it creaked. I looked out of the duty room. In the corridor the light was dim, scattered. Where the doors were, it was dark. You couldn't see anything. Somehow I felt uneasy. However, I think I'll go and see why the door opened. I went, and to give myself confidence, I stepped firmly. The steps echoed dully, and then I notice, no, I even feel, ahead, in the darkness, some subtle movement. I clearly remember, lock yourself up and don't come out, no matter what happens. I slowly retreat to the duty room, slam the door and click the latch. There is a rustle of quick steps along the corridor, stopping right at the door. Then from outside the door is pulled hard by the handle. It gives in a few millimeters, but the valve won't let it go any further. A vague dark silhouette flashes through the crack, and the distinct Swedish smell of a corpse seeps into the duty room. The next moment I grab the doorknob with wild force, and from the corridor something incredibly creepy is trying to get to me. He scratches the door, pulls the handle, fumbles along the door frames and walls, and all this happens in complete silence. You can't even hear heavy breathing. Only the smell of formaldehyde and cold draws you in from behind the door. Along with dawn, deathly silence sets in the corridor. No one scratches or breaks at the door anymore. But for a long time I still cannot let go of the handle. I stand there, clutching it with my fingers, white from tension. The persistent ringing of the bell brings me back to reality and forces me to throw open the door. The corridor is ordinary and empty. That's why it seems that everything that happened at night was a wild nightmare. The lock, as always, jams, and I can't open it for a long time. Finally, I succeed. The shift worker rolled merrily onto the porch. "Well, you're good to sleep. I've been calling for an hour." He is amazed. I mutter indistinctly that I had too much alcohol, didn't hear anything, and that in general, it's better not to touch me today. The workday is in full swing, but I just can't bring myself to go home. I nervously smoke on the porch of the service entrance and desperately try to understand what happened at night, reality or a dream. A senior dissector is smoking nearby, asking me something. I answer him something, but I have only one thought in my head. It was a dream. This can't be true. Here, a trainee comes out onto the porch. Andrei Andreevich, a strange case. I'm preparing the corpse of a drowned man for autopsy. Well, the one that was brought in the day before yesterday, and there's a lot of white paint under his nails. What's strange about that? The senior dissector asks lazily. The paint is dried and old, but the breaks and torn off fingernails of the corpse, in my opinion, are post-mortem fresh. They leave, and I go to the door to the duty room. At the height of human growth, semicircular scratches and uneven chips clearly appear on the smooth white surface.